Hello, it's Friday the 9th of May 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson. Now, later in the programme, we're going to be covering the continuing drive for war. We're going to be covering fluoride in the US and the UK and also online safety. But we're going to kick off with this UK-US trade deal. Big news conference tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. The Oval Office was what Trump was declaring on Wednesday. He went on to say that it was a major trade deal with representatives of a big and highly respected country, the first of many. And then yesterday morning, he revealed that it wasn't India or China, it was the UK, a country which, as I'm sure Mark is about to demonstrate in a second, is already in a trade surplus. The US is already a trade surplus with the UK. So the question is that a big deal? Now, I just want to show this image of Peter Mandelson, the UK's ambassador to the United States, looking down over the shoulder of Donald Trump. I just thought the positioning of people in the room was quite amusing. But I'm not sure what we say about the Prince of Darkness there.
He's still got that gravitas, doesn't he, Mike?
Yes.
He really does.
So,
he hasn't lost it.
No, indeed. So, Mark, let's come over to you. And what are your thoughts on this deal?
Well, of course, it's a little early to tell in terms of the nitty-gritty details. But the White House, and I don't know what slides you might want to show just to kick it off, the White House is announcing a great deal for America, President Trump's breakthrough trade deal. And we also see the Department of Commerce headline, together with the U.S. trade rep, announcing the historic trade deal with the United Kingdom to open markets, raise revenue, and strengthen security. And I listed here some of the organizations in the U.S. that commented favorably. They were quoted by the White House: National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Renewable Fuels, mainly ethanol there, Growth Energy CEO Emily Skor, the Job Creators Network, Consumer Brands Association President Melinda Hochstad, that's the packaged goods industry, and the American Farm Bureau Federation President. And they were, among others, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, the Nebraska governor, the agricultural secretary of the state of Iowa were all commenting favorably. We also have a banking-related thing here going on, where the HSBC USA president and CEO Lisa McGow said today's landmark U.S.-UK trade agreement marks a significant step in strengthening transatlantic economic ties and expanding opportunities for businesses and investors. As a British headquartered bank with a strong U.S. footprint, we're uniquely positioned to help American companies and investors seize new growth opportunities domestically in the UK and beyond. And they're ready to leverage their position, they're saying. And that's a quote from the White House of that banker. And at any rate, I did some research. There's also, of course, the press release from the government of the UK that this is their headline: landmark economic deal with United States saves thousands of jobs for British car makers and the steel industry. Those are the apparent announced beneficiaries, the main beneficiaries of this trade deal: car makers in the steel industry. And the prime minister is saying thousands of jobs are being saved in the process. The U.S. also, we can mention here with this chart, this is the first 3 months of 2025, has been running, and in previous years as well, has been running a trade surplus with the UK. However, in January of this year, they were close to parity. People can look up this chart through the Department of Commerce in the United States. Or excuse me, I believe that's it. Wait a minute. I want to get that right. The chart comes from the Census Department, the census.gov department of the U.S. government. At any rate, there tends to be about a $5 to $7 to $8 billion surplus on the side of the U.S. with the UK as a general rule. Although, again, in January, trade was relatively balanced this year. The gap was only a little over $1 billion. And in trade terms, that's a fairly close gap, the way it goes. But at any rate, the many things that have been listed on both sides of the pond about this include automotive tariffs. The UK will see tariffs on its first 100,000 car exports to the reduced from 27.5 to 10%. The Commerce Secretary of the U.S. is saying that $10 billion worth of Boeing planes will be sold to the U.K. by the U.S. The U.S. will remove tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from the U.K. and reduce those particular tariffs to zero, according to the U.S. government. And we were concerned about farmers. They're saying there's going to be unprecedented market access for British farmers with protections on food standards maintained. This is according to the UK government. We have agreed on new reciprocal market access on beef, with UK farmers given a quota for 13,000 metric tons of beef. There will be no weakening, they're saying, no weakening of of UK food standards on imports. The UK is not going to weaken its food standards, and apparently there's no chance, or there's no indication that chlorinated chicken from the US will be sent to the UK. I think that's been a concern. So that's some of what's going on. It appears to have reasonable benefits for both sides. But of course, there's a lot to unpack when you look at these trade deals. But that's what I've got so far, mainly.
Thank you, Mark. Well, let's just look in a bit more detail at what the UK government is saying this is doing for us. So here's the graphic that we're putting out on Twitter today. The UK and USA have signed a deal to reduce tariffs. Here's what it won't be doing. So this is what they're wanting to focus on. And the first thing that they were focusing on was high food and drink standards. So they're saying the government has been clear that we will only ever sign trade agreements which align with the UK's national interests. Hormone-treated beef and chlorinated chicken is and will remain illegal in the UK. Any US imports will continue to need to meet UK food standards. So they're saying that, in fact, as a result of that, that it's written into the text of this agreement, and as a result of that, there's no chance of these products coming into the UK. But there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about chlorinated chicken, Patrick. But what about this hormone imbued beef? What's that all about?
Well, the question is, Mike, we talked about this at length before the program. You could say, oh, we're not going to have synthetic hormone-infused American beef coming into the British market, and of course, chlorinated chicken. But how do you really regulate all of this stuff? Because the U.S. market is just becoming so deregulated. And I'll put up here a study by the NHS up on screen here. Endocrine disruptors, that's really what we're talking about. And the correlation or the causation for obesity. Now, America has an obese problem. Everybody knows that. And Britain and Europe are catching up very quickly to this as well. So this is an important study here. And there's the gist of this whole thing is right here, endocrine disrupting chemicals. They're calling them obesogens. So they've actually got a name for these chemicals and these synthetic hormones. And they're promoting weight gain, and they're saying that it includes compounds to which the human population is exposed to in daily life through their use of pesticides and herbicides that get into the food chain via the agricultural processes, pesticides and herbicides. Industrial, household products, even Fairy Liquid and Unilever products fall also into these categories as well, flame retardants, etc. So this is a big problem here. It's a massive problem. And it also will go to the Soil Association right here. And so this is actually a great resource if you want to know where things are at the moment. So you just go to the Soil Association and they'll tell you all about, where's the hormonal beef and so forth. And also the carcinogens. There's a carcinogen problem with a lot of these things. It's becoming more and more prevalent, and the lawsuits speak for themselves on this. Here is a lot of great details. Again, the Soil Association is really up to date on legislation, regulation. So it's a great resource. So I encourage people to go there. Bottom line, Mike, though, U.S. is cutting tariffs on British metals and cars. The U.K. is cutting tariffs on USA food. But here's a good question, Mike. When we're talking about the automotive industry, what's Britain trying to do? No combustion engines by what? 2030? Is that the target? Or have they moved
2040 is more likely, I think.
So are you going to have a situation where Jaguar is going to be producing combustion engines for a U.S. market?
No, because Jaguar has already announced they're not going to be producing combustion engines for any market. They're moving full electric.
Cooper Mini, Jaguar. But it's just interesting because the U.S. is on a very different Green New Deal path than Britain. And British and European countries are basically have committed themselves to economic hara-kiri in the Japanese sense,
Right.
While the U.S. is going basically eschewing the whole climate agenda very, very rapidly. So you're going to have a divergence of markets. Could be a gap in the market for some, entrepreneurial
Innovative British company, yes.
good British engineering companies.
Perhaps. Now, coming back onto the food issue again, we've talked about beef, we talked about chicken. What about pork? Because in 2020, the British company Genus announced that they had succeeded in using CRISPR technology to gene edit pigs to protect them from porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, otherwise known as PRRS. Well, you'd be glad to know that these pigs have been approved this week by the US Food and Drug Administration to enter the food chain. They will be sold. So my question then is, will they be sold on the UK market following this deal? Well, remember that it's the UK which leads the world, at least on a legislative point of view, on the question of gene editing. So I'm going to suggest that perhaps the answer to that is yes. But coming back onto the other things that won't be covered or won't be problems as a result of this trade deal, according to the government at least, it won't impact the NHS, they say, because any impact on the NHS, any devastating destruction of that particular organisation, the UK government's quite capable of doing that for itself. It doesn't need a trade deal with the United States to do it. It won't harm UK farmers, they say.
Again,
they felt the need to reiterate that twice.
Because that's their job, the government.
Exactly.
To harm UK farmers.
Once again, and it won't mean American companies in the UK will avoid paying digital services tax. Now, I have to say, Patrick, this is something that you, Mark, and I have been banging on about since 2013, this whole business of multinational digital companies not paying tax in countries that they're providing services into. This is a continuing effort by the British government with this digital services tax to get a handle on this whole thing. And so apparently this deal will not impact that in any way, shape or form. And finally, it won't rule out broader deal in the future. And I think this is the key takeaway from this whole thing. What we're seeing is a first step here. And if they're saying that hormone-infused beef and chlorinated chicken are not part of this particular deal, then don't worry, there's the opportunity in the future to expand this much broader. So we need to keep an eye on what they're doing. Yeah,
and we know how to devastate and wipe out UK agriculture and livestock, don't we? Just by announcing outbreaks of viruses, magic little invisible particles like foot and mouth and bird flu. And there you go. Let's cull the entire livestock and bird population just to be safe,
Absolutely.
Even though it's not deadly to humans, we still need to, or it's not even deadly to birds or even cows. Let's just kill them all just in case.
I guess the other news that we should briefly mention is the new Pope.
There is a new Pope. We'll bring this up on screen. This is not just any Pope, Mike. This is the new pontiff, and controversial in a certain way and novel in other ways as well. And why is that? We'll go here. This is the American Pope, first ever American Pope. Cardinal Robert Prevost has been anointed Pope Leo the 14th. Did I get my Roman numerals right?
You did, yeah.
just about remember them. Pope Leo the 14th. And so this is coming on the heels of Pope Francis, who was a real reformer. Some would call him a leftist, a progressive, the socialist Pope, the Jesuit Pope, etc. Prevost kind of, or Pope Leo, if you will, falls a little bit along that St. Francis line. The Catholic Church is facing all of this pressure to make changes, to change the way the world's changing. There's all these issues like gay marriage, whether to allow married members of the clergy, like other Protestant denominations and so forth. So there's many, many different issues. Obviously, the issue that they don't want to really bring up at the moment in America is Israel. So this is like kind of off the conversation topic list, but it will eventually have to make its way on. I mean, Pope Francis took a very, I would say, deliberate line in defense of the people of Gaza, which made him extremely controversial to certain Zionist Christian factions.
The other area, because that's one area that they don't want to talk about, the other area that they absolutely don't want to talk about is the continuing allegations of sexual abuse of children. And Cardinal Robert Prevost, when he was in Peru, doesn't have that great a reputation in this regard either. It staggers me that we have the two major religious, Christian religious institutions on the planet, the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, and neither of them is prepared to grip this issue. And I've got to say that if, for as long as they don't grip this issue, it seems to me that they are giving tacit approval for this behavior. So there needs to be an acknowledgement of it. There needs to be repercussions, serious repercussions for the people that that are involved in it, and the cover-ups need to stop, and the excuses need to stop. And unfortunately, Cardinal Robert Prevost does not have a great reputation in this area.
Well, neither did Pope Benedict before Francis
indeed.
As well. But interesting you bring up this Peruvian connection. Not only is he the first American Pope, he is also a dual citizen of the country of Peru. So he is a dual national U.S. and Peruvian, and probably by virtue of the amount of time he spent in that country. So the first really Latin American, quasi-Latin American Pope after Francis, but the first North American Pope. So clearly the center of gravity from the Catholic Church globally shifting west. And there's been a huge resurgence of membership in the Catholic Church, popularity, as well as the Orthodox Church.
Is it because of this, by the way? Is that why they're looking to the West? Because of are they seeing the threat of the rise in membership of the Orthodox Church?
No, there's also a concomitant popularity, resurgence of popularity in the Catholic Church as well. So, but definitely in the Orthodox Church, and also the pressure from traditional Catholics, Mike, trad Catholics as they call them, wanting to bring back Latin masses and things like that, rejecting Vatican II reforms. So it's a very, very interesting time right now, especially in the Western Hemisphere regarding the Catholicism and Christianity.
Okay, well, let's move on then to more sort of war-related topics, well, particularly Victory Day, VE Day, and, we're starting off in Plymouth.
Yeah, we're starting off locally. I mean, this is a very big, important day, really, for Plymouth, but throughout the whole country, Victory Day, 80th anniversary, 1945, 2025 here. Plymouth, obviously affected greatly by the Second World War, more so than many other cities as well, because of the bombing and so forth. The Luftwaffe took out a substantial amount of Plymouth's city, but the city council did the rest.
Absolutely.
Afterwards with their brutalist architectural projects. But anyway, this is up on the Hoe here. That's a historic picture. It's great. And we'll go to the local media outlets. Did a very nice retrospective, beautiful photographs here, VE Day, Plymouth's celebrations throughout the years. 80 years ago, people across the globe celebrated tears of joy and grief for all the lives lost as Nazi Germany surrendered. So this is, again, great photographs here on local press, Plymouth Live. They've done a beautiful job, really, on this. You have to give them amazing credit on such a great presentation. But I go to the Facebook page, however, Mike, of the Ministry of Defense. And, there's some strange things sometimes that appear on their social media pages. One of them is, this is the VE Day procession here. And you've got, obviously, the Royal Navy, the British Army, the Royal Air Force, but also international partners. I can't work out what that blue flag is, but I know what that blue and green flag, or the blue and yellow flag is. Do you know what the other flag is?
Well, it's the United Nations and the Commonwealth. So it's Commonwealth.
Oh, it's a Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So why is Ukraine singled out as an international partner? Because a lot of these events you see around the country in small villages, Ukraine has a prominent position. It's almost like it's Ukraine Day as well as VE Day as well. So I'll put a highlight there, Mike. But it's why Ukraine? Why is Ukraine so central to British Victory Day celebrations in 2025? We've created this whole story that somehow we're shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine.
Sorry, I know Brian made this point on Monday, but remind me who Ukraine was fighting for during the Second World War?
Well, they were torn, actually. Western Ukraine, many of them were fighting with the Nazis, with Germany, but Eastern Ukraine were fighting with the Red Army. That's not to say that 100% of people in the East and West were fighting on those sides. So Ukraine was torn in two effectively with the Second World War. And the remnants of those Nazi collaborators, of course, are actually in power in Kiev. Look at this. Just to remind people, today, this is the Banderite Nazis marching in today's Ukraine. They're marching in the streets, torch processions at midnight with ultra-nationalists. This is who the U.S. and the U.K. and NATO are backing in Ukraine. These are the direct descendants of Stefan Bandera. So they're erecting statues to Nazis and they're tearing down memorials to the Second World War, Victory Day memorials that shows what the Soviet Union, the Red Army, lost in defeating the Nazis during the Second World War. So it's a very confusing time, isn't it, Mike, for the West, especially for Britain and France, having really cast their lot with this ultra-nationalist, Nazi-leaning regime in Kiev, with Zelensky kind of at the head, serving at the pleasure of the ultra-nationalists, effectively. I mean, this is how informed, intelligent commentators are seeing it, as well as honest historians. But we have mainstream media who are seeing a different story, unfortunately. But let's go over to Moscow here. And the scenes in Moscow for Victory Day, arguably third biggest holiday in the country after Christmas and Easter, is Victory Day. Big 80-year anniversary. But look at this, Zelensky basically has threatened to world leaders, don't go to the parade in Moscow. That's what Zelensky did this week. Robert Fico there, you saw earlier from Slovakia, the PM, he basically slammed Zelensky for this. How dare you threaten world leaders? And he's saying, you're not threatening me, he said. You're threatening the president of Brazil. You're threatening the president of China, President Xi. And so it really, I think this was a very bad move by Zelensky from a public relations point of view. Even he accused Russia of staging a false flag on VE Day. So if he did it, he would have blamed it on Russia, basically. I mean, this guy, there's Lula there from Brazil with Xi. So they weren't deterred by Zelensky's threats, were they? But, imagine if they made those threats against the United States, what would have happened?
Right.
I mean, it's not safe to go to Victory Day in Washington. Anyway, that's the situation Russia's in. There's Fico there basically tearing strips off Zelensky and the Ukrainians for this. So hats off to the Slovak. Obviously, he survived an assassination attempt, arguably related to this very issue, Mike.
Right.
So I just find it to be very rich, this kind of embracing of Ukraine, especially when they're behaving like this on the international stage, threatening to kill the presidents of China and Brazil if they show up to Moscow for Victory Day. I mean, it's unbelievable. Where is the condemnation from British heads of state, from French, from European, from von der Leyen, from the U.S. head of state? Trump didn't say anything against this.
Right.
I mean, it would have been great if the U.S. sent a representative to the Victory Day, but that might be a bridge too far. So anyway, a lot to say, and again, a lot to deal with here. There's some pictures there. Obviously, there's the lineup, some world leaders. Again, the pageantry. There's Putin embracing the North Korean military brass as well. So for the role they played in the Kursk, the battle for Kursk as well. So they've taken losses on behalf of the Russian Federation. So some deep bonds and roots are being forged as we speak.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Patrick. Now let's move on. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there. We do need your continuing financial support. You can make a donation or you could join as a member. And if you do join as a member, that gives you access to UK Column News Extra and also the UK Column forums and so on. Other ways to support us, you could join, pick something up at the UK Column shop. But if you buy something from clivethecar.com using the link on this page, we get a small commission from that. But you can't do any of that, that's fine. But please do share our material you find on the various platforms. We are censored, as everybody knows. And if you're able to help get around the censorship regime, that is fantastic. Now, yesterday's interview between Ben and Braden Sorbo is online on the UK Column website. If you haven't seen that, do go and have a look at it. And tonight, Jerm will be speaking about the black nobility. And I think that the timing of that is interesting, bearing in mind we've just had this the new Pope elected and so on. And of course, the black nobility connections to the Vatican are are legendary. So that's a discussion on germ warfare at 7 p.m. tonight. If you're able to join us for that, please do so. Another reminder of Stand in the Light, taking place May the 23rd to the 26th in Gilgarran and Cumbria. Well, unfortunately, we had technical problems on Wednesday, and so Daren from the Light was not able to join us in Extra, so he will be joining us for Extra today for a few minutes to discuss this. So please follow on Extra to get the details of the Stand in the Light conference. Now let's move back to war. And well, the United States has decided to announce that it wants Britain to stay away from Asia and the South China Sea and keep their focus on Europe. Now, this policy has been communicated to the UK regime by this man, Elbridge Colby. He is the US Under Secretary of State for Defence Policy. And he has also expressed unhappiness that HMS Prince of Wales, our illustrious aircraft carrier, that the deployment that it's currently on includes time in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, he obviously doesn't understand that British ships tend to break down in warm water, and so probably he doesn't have that much to worry about in this case. But anyway, this is all about the narrative from the United States that European nations should take more responsibility for their own defence and security. Now, my personal view is that the hope from some that the threat of Trump is enough to get EU Defence Union over the line against the headwinds of EU member state intransigence is still only a hope, and it seems to have lost quite a bit of the momentum that it had in the weeks following the Trump inauguration. But let's just remind ourselves of what J.D. Vance said back in the middle of last year. This is just a short excerpt, and he's talking about Israel, the EU, and the United States and their relative roles in the world.
Again, we don't want a broader regional war. We don't want to get involved in a broader regional war. The best way to do that is to ensure that Israel, with the Sunni nations, can actually police their own region of the world. And that allows us to spend less time and less resources on the Middle East and focus more on East Asia. In the same way that we want our own allies to do the job in Europe so that we can focus on East Asia, I think that the same is true of the Sunni nations in Israel and the Middle East. We want to focus more on East Asia.
So that's absolutely clear. This has been a consistent message from the United States for months, certainly from the Trump side of the aisle. They're very keen that everybody looks after their own part of the world because they want to focus on China and East Asia.
That's a strategy of offshore balancing, and the U.S. has been trying to engineer this really since 9/11, and that's just, not successfully, of course. They've tried it with Saudi Arabia, with the war in Yemen under Obama. They've tried it with proxy wars. So it's one of those things that's easy to talk about, difficult to do. Still trying to cling to empire. The thing I'll quickly say, Mike, is he said Sunni nations twice.
Right.
So, I mean, Vance, clueless. Trying to promote sectarianism, basically. They're not Sunni nations, okay? And he's trying to impose American, Western sectarian narratives. And this is the exact type of situation that shaped the al-Qaeda takeover of Syria, basically, that we are seeing right now, is this mindset in the West. Unfortunately, Vance has not, learned.
And the irony here is, if it can be called an irony, of course, it's the extremist groups, the extremist Islamic groups around the world are Sunni groups.
They are. They happen to be, or they say they're Sunni. They're about as religious as any other wacky religious fundamentalist extremist. But that's exactly, again, playing into the sectarian narratives. It's sad to hear that, but unfortunately, I hope they'll learn. I hope they'll do better going forward.
But on the policy of everybody looking after their own business, the US is going to get no argument from Britain on that, as we've been highlighting for years, because Britain has been a key driver of European defence. Now, yesterday morning, Starmer was speaking at the London Defence Conference, and we'll get to him in a second, but we're going to begin with Poland's Radosław Sikorski, who's maybe the only EU politician who can rival the British for its rabid Russophobia. He said this.
Improving European defence should not, obviously, come at the expense of our commitment to NATO and the unique role it plays in the European security system. Therefore, instead of advocating strategic autonomy for Europe, it is, in my view, better to call it strategic harmony of the European Union and NATO.
It's really staggering to me how this point has to keep being made. There was never any question of European Defence Union replacing NATO. It was always the case in every document that the EU published on this topic that it would be a defence union within NATO. In other words, it would bring the European Commission onto the NATO board, if you like, and as a formal participant. But anyway, as for Starmer, he simply lied through his teeth in his presentation at that conference. Here's what he had to say. The British people have already paid a price for Putin's aggression in Ukraine with rising bills and prices. Russia already menaces our security. They've launched cyber attacks on our NHS, spread disinformation online. And we cannot forget, he said a few years ago, a chemical weapons attack on our streets in Salisbury in broad daylight in the heart of England. And in the coming in the coming weeks, he said, we're going to publish a first of its kind root and branch strategic defence review. It will scrutinise every aspect of defence to determine how we can best meet the threats of the day and return Britain to war-fighting readiness. And I mean, really, how do we do that? Where's he going to get the personnel? And what's the need for this? And if he's talking about the cost of living crisis being driven by Russia, no, it isn't. It's being driven by him, his predecessors, and undoubtedly his successors as well. It is absolutely a choice that's been made to turn Britain back into war-fighting readiness.
Explain to us how, I'm stretched, it's a stretch for me, but how the Russians are responsible for rising energy bills in Britain and Europe. How did Russia pull that off? Did they raise the prices? Did Russia, or was it our governments that sanctioned Russia and bought American LNG over the Atlantic for like 4 times the price? And the fake markets run out of the City of London, the middlemen, energy buyers jacked up the price, the spot price of gas. Is it them or is it Putin? Because I don't know, I'm confused. I want to believe.
You want to believe Keir?
I want to believe Keir, but it doesn't add up. But anyway, that's just me. Sometimes I get confused.
Yes, indeed. Now let's follow on then. Same sort of theme, I suppose, but the announcement from Trump that, a deal had been done with Yemen. What's going on? Well,
over to this story. And so that's the question, Mike. This Trump truce with Yemen that's been announced, or is it really a surrender? Has the U.S. surrendered to Yemen, or is this really a truce? Let's take a close look at this. Trump ditched Israel with surprise Houthi truce. So the Israeli Times, they're not happy about this at all. Israeli media, that doesn't bode well on Iran. So they're a little bit worried about this shift that's going on with Trump's playing another little sort of Kansas City shuffle here, maybe with Yemen. But here's what the BBC have to say, and to their credit, Mike, the Houthis say the U.S. backed down and Israel not covered by ceasefire. So this ceasefire agreement between Trump and the Yemenis doesn't mean that Trump's saying don't attack Israel. He's not saying don't attack Israel. So Israel's not covered in the ceasefire. So the BBC actually say back down. I was shocked. So it's almost like the BBC is getting involved in some little bit of truthful inferences here. Not much, but it's something anyway. So, and we go on here. Just remember, we published this Hornet going off the USS Harry Truman into the Red Sea because it was evading a Houthi missile strike, and that was weird. Okay, but it was even more weird that it happened again. A second fighter crashes into the sea after a landing failure, quote unquote. $67 million aircraft there lost in the Red Sea. So that's 2. Okay, there's another one as well a little bit earlier, but all these losses are racking up, and I'm now questioning, Mike, was it a coincidence or did any of these actually get shot down? Well, let's think about that for a moment. Let's look at this once again. I think we somehow
just keep
went into anyway. Back to if we bring back to the camera now, but while we go through those slides, so we're trying to add up basically what this is all what this means in the sense of where the U.S. is at on this. So we'll go back to back on screen here. So if we add all these losses up here, And here's the Yemenis dancing on an American flag there somewhere in Yemen. There's Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of War, donning his tattoos, his many tattoos. But let's look at this. This is what he's responsible for. Hegseth, U.S. losses so far against Yemen. Yemen's Ansar Allah, a.k.a. the Houthis, shot down at least 7 U.S. Reaper drones worth more than $200 million. That's on the conservative side there. And U.S. lost 2 FA-18 Super Hornet jet fighters, again, collectively worth over $200 million there. Total costs for this are well over $1 billion, this operation. 6 weeks of airstrikes here. So the USS Harry Truman damaged after near miss by Houthi missiles. So there's also reports of damage. Are we getting the full story about what has happened in the Red Sea, or the U.S. covering up that they've actually had planes, manned planes shot down, or that their USS Harry Truman aircraft carriers actually been hit?
So this is a good question, because the third one, the one that happened before Christmas, that was supposedly a friendly fire incident where it was shot down by one of the carrier support ships. That is what the official story was. I would question that. Was that actually where they shot down by the Houthis?
Once, twice, 3 times? Or are we looking at coincidences here, or just massive incompetence or negligence, whatever? And the Red Sea shipping has been halted. Israel's Ben Gurion airport is also shut down after Houthi strikes. So look at this. This is the most U.S. military combat losses in this sort of window than I think anything I've ever seen in my life against one of the poorest countries in the world. So for Pete Hegseth, it's not a good look. It's not a good look at all. So I think he's going to resign or be fired pretty soon. So we'll see. I think we got caught in the same loop.
Right. Okay. So
again, so we'll have to go. We'll wait, and we'll try to advance the slides for a moment. Sorry about the technical difficulties. But anyway, what we'll bring onto the screen in a moment when we try to rescue this segment, which is actually a train wreck, but we'll try to rescue it here. This is a timeline of events. So here we are. So this is what you need to pay attention to. The U.S. first, March 15th, 6-week-long bombing campaign on Yemen. Okay. After that, 3 days later, Israel ends its ceasefire in Gaza, resumes the genocide. That was March 18th. And then after that, U.S.-Iran nuclear talks begin on April 11th. And Yemen shuts down Ben Gurion Airport on May 4th in Tel Aviv. Israel starts Operation Gideon's Chariot to seize Gaza, the whole of Gaza, on May 6th. That was just this past week. And Israel attacks Yemen, destroys Sana'a airport in response to the Ben Gurion missile strike by Yemen. That was on May 7th. And after that, Trump calls for a, quote, truce with Yemen on May 8th. So I think there's, to me, a clear pattern of what's happening here. And then Trump sidelines Netanyahu in communications. We'll show you some details of that in a moment. Trump's going to visit the Gulf states, not Israel, next week. So you see the progression of events here. It's looking very clear what's going on. Israel attacking Yemen during a U.S. operation, I think, might have been a final straw for Trump with Israel. So I don't know if there was deconfliction there, how much cooperation or support the Israelis had by the U.S., or how much permission, what was the conversation like? Clearly, the whole thing is a shambles, basically, evidenced by the fact Trump has announced a truce with Yemen, which doesn't include Israel. So that's the part that I think is worth noting here. So Trump is, quote, losing patience. This is the Cradle. Multiple media reports have said this as well. Advances U.S. plans without Israeli involvement. That is serious break from before. Trump sidelines Netanyahu in Middle East policy as relations deteriorate. This is from the Israeli press, again, right here. And so we'll look at where this one story came from is right here. Yanir Kozin. He is the diplomatic correspondent for Israeli Army Radio, and he basically said that Trump's team were upset because Ron Dermer, who is Netanyahu's chief aide, basically said Trump needs to do this, and so forth. It's in this tweet here. And so Trump's inner circle warned him that Netanyahu is manipulating the American president, and the characterization deeply displeased Trump, given that Trump hates nothing more than appearing to be manipulated. So serious problems here between Netanyahu's office and Trump. It looks like things are basically going not well at all. Trump cuts off communication with Netanyahu, direct communication. He's meeting Netanyahu's chief aide, but not Netanyahu. He's not going to Israel next week. He's going to the Gulf states. He's going to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, and not to Israel. So,
and what do you think Netanyahu's response is going to be to this? Is he going to say, "Well, don't care," or is he going to actually? I mean, is this Trump just doing his usual efforts to try to force people or encourage people, let's say, to take certain actions?
Yeah, I think Trump wants to see results in some of these things because it's been 100 days. They haven't really got any real tangible results. A lot of talk on Gaza and Ukraine and the Iran nuclear situation. And Israel seems to be standing in the way of the progress. So the problem is Israel. You can't blame the Palestinians anymore. They can't blame the Russians. They can't blame the Iranians. The problem on all of these fronts is Israel. Israel is impeding progress for the Trump administration to get anything done. And that is the big takeaway.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for that. Okay, Mark, let's welcome you back to the program. And, well, we're going to talk about fluoride and fluoride in the water system.
Yeah, let me preface my remarks by mentioning that fluoride in the water system and the deterioration of our soils, glyphosate coming out of the Monsanto Roundup product, and of course, mRNA injections, the jab, are really all part of this corporate government juggernaut that has been degrading human health for a very long time. So you could look at fluoride in a way that would be similar to the way you would look at mRNA injections. There are these government experiments that are declared to be miracles, and yet they have this seriously ugly underbelly. Anyway, it's important to take, Patrick was doing just a minute ago, to take stock of things. Utah, let's see this one. Let's show this headline. Utah becomes the first state to ban fluoride in its water in terms of statewide. And they're following concerns raised by HHS Secretary RFK Jr., and this is according to the BBC, that the mineral fluoride poses potential health risks. The Utah Governor Spencer Cox signed the ban into law this week. It took effect just 2 days ago, May 7th. Other states, including Florida and Ohio, are weighing similar legislation. Fluoride has been added to U.S. drinking water since 1945. Speaking of 80th anniversaries, right? Moving on from there, Florida did something very pivotal. They've become the second state to ban fluoride in public drinking water. This is dated 3 days ago, and this comes from Children's Health Defense. And Governor DeSantis said Florida is ending fluoridation because, quote, when you do this in the water supply, you're taking away choices of people who may not want to have overexposures. And let's move on and outline this a little bit more. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on the 6th of May said he'll sign the bill banning the addition of fluoride to public drinking water, making Florida the second state statewide to do this. And this ban will take effect July 1st. There's a little bit of a concern there. This has happened with laws to restrict abortion. They advance a wide timeline before a law will take effect, and it provides an opportunity for pro-fluoride forces, the American Dental Association, et cetera, to file lawsuits and then kind of bottleneck this sort of legislation from taking effect. At any rate, the Florida bill is Senate Bill 700, also known as the Florida Farm Bill. It passed the State House by a whopping 88 to 27, a pretty good mandate there in the State House in Tallahassee, sending the bill to the governor's desk. We got a couple quotes from DeSantis that outline this pretty well. When you do this in the water supply, you're taking away a choice of someone who may not want overexposure to fluoride. Now, he's enunciating a very important principle there. Even if fluoride was the greatest thing in the world, you still don't have the right to mass medicate everyone through the common water supply because not everyone has the same tolerances. Not everyone should even have fluoride to begin with. Even aspirin can be good for some people and bad for others. So the principle of fluoride has always been wrong. I mean, if human immunity is a problem, why not put vitamin C in the water, right? If people are depressed, why not put Prozac in the common water? That would be the same wrong principle. At any rate, there's one other quote from Mr. DeSantis that's worth putting up. We don't want local governments unilaterally injecting a chemical into the water supply and exposing people to potentially harmful side effects. Another important principle there. What's the point in pointing out fluoride's hazards, things like that, and making some good strides in this issue and having a statewide moratorium on these things if local governments then have the local authority to put the fluoride in anyway? So it's very important to have a blanket law within the state so you don't have these renegade localities putting this dangerous chemical, according to many, in the public common water supply. Now, other U.S. towns and counties that have already banned water fluoridation on the local or regional level, we got Portland, Oregon, Wichita, Kansas, something called the Brushy Creek Municipal Utility District in Texas, State College, Pennsylvania, where there's a major university there, and parts of South Carolina. So in other words, the U.S. is still rather heavily fluoridated. Now, in the UK, we might want to show this slide here. It helps outline what you got on your side of the pond. Fluoride in drinking water. This is according to a source called Pure H2O UK. Where added, fluoride is brought up to 1 milligram per liter in the UK. That's 1 part fluoride to 1 million parts water. The UK sets the maximum levels at 1.5 milligrams per liter in line with World Health Organization guidance. And I wasn't totally aware that the WHO weighed in on that. And I did find also a map of England. And this is interesting. This comes from the UK government itself. The dark blue areas are where there are direct, deliberate fluoridation schemes. And you can see that Birmingham, right in the middle of the country, kind of the lower center of England, is heavily fluoridated. You got Lincoln. People can look at this map, of course. They can freeze the frame. It'll be in the show notes how to look at this. And up north, Newcastle area, there's quite a bit of fluoridation. Then the lighter blue, limited areas, is where there's naturally occurring fluoride at levels greater than 0.5 milligrams. So an important and informative thing there. It's interesting to note, we can show this too. This comes from the same spot in the UK government website. This is from 2020. In terms of coverage, what are known as the West Midlands is the most extensively fluoridated area, followed by parts of the northeast of England. But get this, there are no fluoridation schemes in Scotland, none in Wales, and none in Northern Ireland. However, there are some localized areas of naturally occurring fluoride in the water. So that gives a reasonable outline of this issue. I'll mention that viewers might want to stick around for extra. There's a short video that explains a crucial distinction here between naturally occurring fluoride and the man-made fluoride compounds that come from manufactured aluminum, things like that. So stay tuned for that. A very important distinction to be made.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that. Yeah, we'll be showing that video clip in extra. Now let's move on to the Online Safety Act. And yesterday, the Wikimedia Foundation announced that it is challenging the lawfulness of one of the new elements of the Online Safety Act. And by that, they're talking about as Ofcom starts to roll out the various regimes, the various frameworks to actually implement parts of the Online Safety Act. And they're focusing, this is Wikimedia Foundation, is focusing on the element of the Online Safety Act that determines which duties a website has under the law. And they're complaining specifically about the aspects of the Act, and also something that we've been highlighting since the Online Harms White Paper was originally published in 2017, and that's the broad brush lack of definition of terms. So basically, because terms remain so ill or undefined, they can be taken to mean virtually anything. And the issue that Wikipedia is upset about is the categorization of services. So to quote them a little bit here, they're saying, the Foundation is challenging the Online Safety Act's categorization regulations, which are written broadly enough that they could place Wikipedia as a Category 1 service, a platform posing the highest possible level of risk to the public. Now, I personally view Wikipedia as absolutely being one of the highest risk websites that's out there, but we'll talk about that in a second, no doubt. Now, Wikipedia goes on to say that they simply do not operate like other Category 1 sites. Someone reading an online encyclopedia article about a historical figure or cultural landmark is not exposed to the same level of risk as someone scrolling on social media. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. The Foundation's sole objective, they say, is to allow people to participate in the creation and dissemination of verifiable knowledge. The Category 1 duties threaten that, for example, by disempowering users who wish to keep their identities private. Now, this is ironic, I'm going to suggest, in a sense, because I'm certain that many, if not all, the voices behind Wikipedia have been at front of the queue for people calling for the removal of anonymous posting on some other sites on the internet. I mean, they certainly have been promoting the continuing anonymization of some people posting content on Wikipedia itself. But anyway, they're bringing this issue to judicial review, and they say they've asked for expedited hearings because they're already under pressure from Ofcom to provide information under the new regime. And they say that as the UK government works to protect the public from harms of the internet, so they are acknowledging that the internet is harmful. We hope it also prioritizes the protecting of the best parts of the internet, public interest projects like Wikipedia that uplift civil society and promote access to free and open knowledge online. Except, Patrick, it's not free and open, is it? For example, nobody still has admitted who Philip Cross is. And this is really the point. There is so much information on Wikipedia, which is disinformation, which is certainly opinionated in ways that the Wikimedia Foundation would argue that Wikipedia shouldn't be, and has been targeting many people who are providing resistance to the war narratives and to a host of other narratives that are out there. And, this question of Philip Cross, I think, is one that's absolutely in the public interest.
Well, most of the overwhelming amount of information on Wikipedia, Mike, is of great use to the public and is a great free resource, and I agree with all of that. However, it's also been abused. The Philip Cross scandal, you could have a situation here where the same government that's pushing online harms legislation is also the same government whose security services are abusing Wikipedia's editorial and gaming the editorial process at Wikipedia to defame and to libel and to smear all independent journalists and other opposition voices to foreign policy issues right across the entire spectrum of media. And that's what that scandal is all about, Mike. So again, I just have to go back to this point, Mike. Is the internet really harmful? Or has the government somehow changed its view of the internet? Because last time I checked, the internet's been around since the mid-90s. And, mums forums and baby forums and stuff like that have been going for 30 years, Mike. 30 years. All of a sudden, it's now dangerous. It's now harmful and needs to be a Category 1 risk to public safety. I mean, it's kind of patently ridiculous. There must be a better way to deal with these issues than to start doing mass censorship.
Well, look, the fact of the matter is, Patrick, that the issues that are considered harmful, and whether it be suicide, terrorism, these issues are societal issues. And all you're doing by censoring them is treating a symptom. Again, you're not dealing with the underlying societal problem which is causing this in the first place, because of course many of these things are tools of the state in and of themselves, and so but there's a whole discussion around that which undoubtedly will go into more depth in extra.
If they put this much attention on the fact that our society is so over medicated with antidepressant medication and the real harms that and the suicides that leads to, they put half the energy into regulating and dealing with that problem as they do on the internet and censoring speech on the internet, we might actually be getting somewhere.
Well, indeed. Mark, sticking with the media and so on, let's move to the United States and the press corps.
This issue, of course, I had mentioned briefly in Extra a few newscasts ago, and I wanted to get into a little more depth. It's obviously an issue that can be looked at in an ongoing fashion. This first slide actually indicates that the welcoming of new media voices into the White House actually started to a degree in Trump's first term. This is from 2021. The Epoch Times, Trump's favorite cult propaganda machine, according to Presenza, was supporting the White House and how U.S. anti-COVID efforts have been derailed, part 3. So this personality shown here for Epoch Times, he was compared by this publication, Presenza, compared to Joseph Goebbels. A bit unfair, I would say. At any rate, we also have Pointer News pointing out, forgive the pun, meet the 32 new media outlets the White House has invited to its press pool. For decades, the White House Correspondents Association, the independent nonprofit, is the organization that's been determining the makeup of the press pool. That changed. The pivotal point was February 25th of this year, when the White House press team took control of the pool in an effort to, quote, give power back to the people, end quote, according to White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt. And we have a quote, I believe, from her. It's beyond time, she said, that the White House press operation reflects the media habits of the American people in 2025, not 1925, she said. A select group of DC-based journalists should no longer have a monopoly over the privilege of press access to the White House, she was recently quoted as saying. Now, going beyond those slides, I did a little bit more research. It's an interesting and eclectic mix going on at the White House, gentlemen. Just for example, there's even think tanks. There's the America First Policy Institute, which is more like a think tank than a press outlet. There's Global Strat View, which describes itself as a media think tank hybrid. There's Notice, otherwise known as News of the United States. They did publish some articles about Trump's tariffs and about the Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen trying to help that El Salvador guy. They published a couple critical stories of the Trump administration on those topics, and they are admitted as part of the new press pool there, and so on and so forth. And on the good side of the ledger, most of the new media there are going to have an opposite view, largely compared to the mainstream media, on climate change, an opposite view compared to the legacy media on the border, open border, closed border, an opposite view largely compared to the mainstream media on the efficacy and safety of vaccines, let's say. But on the other hand, of course, we have the Israel factor. And most, I wouldn't say all, but most of the new media are pretty strongly pro-Israel. Some of this might be kissing up to the Trump administration just to get a seat at the table. That dynamic is pretty much unavoidable. It's going to happen. But you also have the Daily Wire by Ben Shapiro. Of course, he's pretty rabidly pro-Israel. And he's done a lot of stories that have been trumpeting the idea that Trump is signing executive orders to deport what the Daily Wire calls anti-Semitic foreign students and protesters. Of course, there's a major irony there. You got free speech being enhanced, perhaps, by the new media at the White House, but then some of that new media turns around and cancels the free speech and assembly rights of protesters that are protesting the Israeli treatment of Gaza. And you also have other networks. As we wind this up, we have the Eternal Word Television Network, the Catholic news outlet that has been critical of Israeli bombing of Gaza because they violate Catholic traditional just war principles as they've been known throughout history. But then on the other hand, you have the Christian Broadcasting Network founded by Pat Robertson that's very, very pro-Israel. And then lastly, I'll mention that another interesting dynamic is the news outlet that's allowed in the new press pool. That one of the new entities in the press pool, they're called Semaphore, and they're actually mainstream legacy journalists that quit their regular jobs and formed a new news organization. And they have a founder and CEO, Justin Smith, who's a lifetime member of the Council on Foreign Relations as part of the new press pool. So it's an eclectic mix, and the Israeli factor is kind of the where the pivot point is. But it's a mixed bag. There's a lot of advantages. It is a good move toward free speech. On the other hand, there's a lot of nuance there. So maybe we can go a little bit more on this in extra. So
Thanks, Mark. Thanks.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And now let's finish, Patrick, with Jonathan Cook.
This is interesting. I think people will get a kick out of this as well. So this is Amnesty International, their 2025 People's Choice Awards for journalists there. And there's the pantheon of, I guess you could say left-wing journalists that Amnesty's membership, shortlist based on votes by Amnesty UK members here. Let's take a look at these, because there's one journalist in here, Mike, on this, one journalist that I would vote for. Take a wild guess who it is. Don't say it. We'll go through the list here. Let's bring the list up here. These are the nominees for Amnesty International's, top independent journalists here. Owen Jones. Okay. Owen Jones. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to cross him out. I think he's a bit of a deep state shill, actually. Jeremy Bowen. Is he BBC?
Yeah, he is, absolutely, yes.
So I'm going to cross him off there, disqualified. Nesreen Malik. I actually looked up her work. She writes for The Guardian. She actually does some very good journalism. So I like her. I'm going to leave her on my list. Lisa Doucette, BBC.
A bit spooky, perhaps.
A bit spooky. Fergal Keane, trusted voice of, the major networks. I don't think so. Patrick Cockburn, actually an excellent journalist. Great career, stellar. I'm going to leave him on the short list. Jonathan Cook, of course, needs no introduction. Jonathan Cook is one of the top journalists, I think, independent journalists on Palestine. Former Guardian, left, got shunned by The Guardian, so he's got a lot of street cred. George Monbiot, I preemptively crossed him out, so as not to traumatize anybody in the audience. But George Monbiot is an absolute deep state shill. He is everything that is bad about mainstream media. George Monbiot embodies it. So how he gets on these lists is just beyond me. Ash Sarkar and Michael Walker. Navarro Media. I'm not sure about Navarro Media. They seem to be very politicized. So again, I put a little radioactive warning on Monbiot. Navarro has done some good work on Palestine on that issue. So I'm on the fence there, but let's look at those here. The one that I'm going to back on this is Jonathan Cook. So I'm going to say, go to his Substack page, folks, and take a look at his work there. It's absolutely brilliant. He is one of the really true independent media journalists out there. There's Jonathan up on screen. He's based in the UK now. He's been in the West Bank for many years. His work is stellar. Some of his recent work is this one he's done here, basically on Simon Sebag Montefiore and Simon Schlama, calling them shilling for Israel's genocide, and they must be outed. And this is an amazing piece that he's done. This is one of the best things I've read in a while. So again, go to Jonathan Cook's Substack, support Jonathan, but more importantly here, vote for Jonathan. Go to this. There's a URL at the bottom, amnesty.org UK.
It'll be in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes. Listen, I don't want to push my choices on you guys, but vote for Jonathan Cook. Because if it's about integrity and great journalism and somebody who is just totally unwavering in his principles, there's no contest. I mean, the other Patrick Cockburn and some of the others are excellent journalists, but Jonathan Cook has basically distinguished himself after October 7th, especially, but throughout his whole career. There's really nobody else that you can really, I think, vote for. If it comes to independent journalism, please, I think we need to get involved. Make sure we get Jonathan Cook over the finish line, folks.
He certainly deserves to come well ahead of Lisa Doucette and Jeremy Bowen at the very least. So yes, vote for him. Okay, we got to leave it there for today. Thank you very much, Patrick and Mark. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back for Extra in a couple of minutes. Join us then. Bye-bye.